Hey guys, Pascal here. We actually had a live show this week. The Erins, Val, and Luke went on the air and talked about 2 stories they're working on. The first one comes from a conversation Hedge had with a local police accountability advocate. The advocate put in a public records request for photos generated from automated license plate readers, or flock cameras, with the license plate number of a van used by ICE. The van is owned by Geo Group, who's not only contracted to take immigrants to the Tacoma Detention Center, but also runs the center. Along with the single and only photo he got back, he also got a call from an attorney representing Geo Group, Joan Mell. She wanted to make sure he didn't want to hurt, and she actually used this phrase, her peeps. The second story is a rundown of rumors swirling around the United States Post Office, thanks to a vague essential services letter given to postal workers across the country, including Spokane. Val explains how she's been trying to track down the reasoning behind issuing the letter and how it's been contributing to online fears of martial law. You can find relevant articles, other podcast episodes, and more on our website, rangemedia.co. Thanks for listening, and on to the show.
Luke, other Erin, and Val. We're all here together. It's been a little while, a few weeks.
Yeah, it has. I mean, more than a few weeks for me.
Maybe
Luke and I
months.
have been fighting these zombie sinus infections that just keep coming back to life every time you think you've recovered.
Yeah, that's some news. The germ theory of disease. Don't like that.
You both sound pretty good today.
Yeah, feeling better.
I think we're maybe at the tail end of it.
The husky fun part of
where we
the losing your voice.
Have kind of like hot smokers' voices.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you can't tell we've been dying for a month and a half.
So the plan, because I've also been on a little bit of a vacation, was a little bit to just kind of bring me up to speed on things. We've got a couple big items to chat about. One of which is a story about kind of transparent open government hedge that you've been working on. We haven't published any of these things we're going to talk about today, but we thought we'd give you a little preview today on the show. So yeah, what's going on with immigration, open government, and records requests and stuff like that?
Well, so
very specific question.
Also, happy late birthday, Luke.
Oh, thanks.
It was Luke's birthday over the weekend.
Yeah, I'm old.
All right. Well, yeah. So I was. This is kind of. It was a tangential way into this story, and Sellers knew a little bit about this already, but I was driving to Olympia for a lobby day with the Washington Coalition for police accountability, and they've got a bunch of bills in the legislature. But I rode down there with a local police accountability activist. He's been on the show before, Jim Leedy, and we were just chatting about different things, and he started telling me about this public records request that he filed in December, and it was kind of at the suggestion of Sellers, so this kind of like came out of range a little bit.
Not necessarily the suggestion. I was just a member of the community messaged me with questions about the capabilities of Flock and what kind of searches you can make, and I offered some insight as a reporter into the kinds of searches that have been made and what kind of searches the public can make through public records requests.
So one of the kind of like, I guess like the kind of meta impetus of this is like, obviously there's this huge like surveillance security or surveillance net that has been constructed around the country using these flock cameras. That's the brand that is in Spokane County, but it's automated license plate readers that take pictures of every car that passes them and feeds the data from those photos into this network of information that can sometimes be accessed by basically any police agency across the country if the permissions are set broadly enough. And the government uses that to track citizens, and I think it sounds like you and Jim were kind of like chatting about like how could that be flipped? How could the community start using that information potentially to see what our government officials are doing? And so Jim filed a records request with the Spokane County Sheriff's Department asking for any flock photographs of the vehicle that takes immigrants who have been arrested on immigration violations from Spokane or Eastern Washington to the ICE facility, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement facility in Tacoma for holding, or they also take them to the jail in Kootenai County, just whatever facility they have permission to work in that will hold these folks. And
we should also say that the ICE detention facility in Tacoma is not run by ICE. It's run by a private prison contractor called Geo Group.
Yes. And I think that was some of the folks who have been keeping an eye on ICE locally, trying to track ICE movements. There's like pretty obviously an ICE facility on Cataldo. There's a parking lot outside the ICE facility. And I think that folks have been tracking both vehicles associated with ICE agents and also the main transport vehicle that takes folks who are detained in Spokane to the other side of the state is a van that is contracted and run by the Geo Group, same group that runs the Tacoma Detention Center.
Yeah, and we saw that back on the June 11th protest. There was that van and other vehicles that had Geo Group kind of not like huge on the side, but actually kind of stamped on the side in like a small way. Yep.
Right. So these vans have been in the news kind of all the latter half of last year, I guess. And so Jim requested any ALPR data on this particular van.
Did he only request data for that van, or did he have like a list of license plates?
I'm not sure I know there's at least one, but I'm not sure if there are multiples. I know that he only got one photo back, but that's kind of like after the fact of this story. Because the interesting thing about this story, I think, is that about a little less than a month after Jim filed that request, he gets a phone call, a voice message from a private attorney named Joan Mell. She has offices in Tacoma and in Montana. And she's a private attorney. She represents kind of a wide array of different types of clients. And we can dig into like who those clients are in a little bit. But she's not small potatoes. She sits on the board of the Washington Coalition for Open Government, or WashCog, which is kind of just like this. It's a nonprofit that advocates for open government policy.
And a lot of what that means practically on the ground is public records requests and stuff like that. They've been known to like help journalism organizations and private citizens like get access to public records faster because they've been around for a while. They're one of the people we think of as like allies in the fight to like make sure that we have transparent government.
Yeah, they've consulted in particular on a couple of stories of mine where I was trying to get records back and facing kind of like a little bit of obstruction, and they provided me some advice on like, here's some places you can push back, here's a law that might be on your side, or sorry, you're out of luck, unfortunately state law is pretty rigid here and they're well within their rights to deny you that document. So it's been kind of very helpful as a young journalist who was getting my feet under me. I think I was more in contact with them in my first 2 years, but yeah, they're very helpful to journalists in navigating public records, or that has been our experience so far.
So Joan Mell is this private attorney who's on the board of this organization. What did she talk to Jim Leedy about, or why did she reach out to Jim Leedy?
Well, and okay, so she calls him, he calls her back, and she kind of like tells him who she is. Like she represents certain clients. She's trying to represent, for example, Pierce County Sheriff Keith Swank in a bunch of like investigations that he's involved in. We can dive more into that in a little bit, but and she's on the board of WACOG, but it becomes clear that during the call that she is calling in representation of Geo Group. She's representing Geo Group on this call, and she says to him, I'm calling just to make sure that you don't want to hurt my peeps, is the phrase that she used, her peeps. And she used that on the phone, that same phrase on the phone with me a number of times.
She's among many things hip with the times.
She's hip with the times, yeah. But he says, oh, well, and the thing that she's worried about is like Jim reconstructing the normal routes of this vehicle and potentially like trying to sabotage it in some way. And I think the image that pops to mind for Jim was like him like posted up on a hill with a sniper rifle,
right?
And Jim obviously was like, no, I would never do something like that. Here's the reasons that I was interested in this data. He characterized it first and foremost as a fishing expedition. He was just trying to like see what kind of data he could get out of this records request. And so Joan says,
because like a lot of these ICE vehicles are unmarked. We've read stories nationally, and I don't know if this has been done locally, but like about they're switching their license plates all the time just to obscure it, to stop people from following them, to stop people from trying to track their movements. And so this is an example of like an ICE adjacent vehicle, and a vehicle that ICE uses, but it's like tied to a different organization. Maybe they're not doing, because it's part of like the transportation of prisoners from one side of the state to the other. Maybe they're not doing that same sort of OPSEC to like replace the plates and stuff as frequently. So it actually makes sense as an investigative, like to start here to be like, okay, how much information can I get on this vehicle? And then if you can get a lot, maybe this is a tactic we do to track other ICE vehicles or something.
I think it's also like particularly interesting and relevant. This is like a tiny bit of a tangent, but there was a court case out of the western side of the state where somebody was seeking these kinds of records. Mm-hmm. So with my flock reporting, what I was asking for was like a giant Excel sheet that was basically like, here's every search we've made. Yeah. But there was somebody on the west side of the state who made a request that was like, I want every photo of this vehicle that has ever been taken on any flock cameras that still like exists in your database. And it went to court, and ultimately they found that was a public record, and they did have to turn that over, which I know where you're going, and I do think we should touch on that. Yeah. This is interesting because I think Lita was both trying to fish for like, our license plates switching. Yeah. Will they give me these photos? There's also the element of how long do they keep data that shows up on these cameras? Yeah. Because they say on their, portal that they only keep data for 30 days. But I noticed, and I reported this, and I think it was something that Lady brought up in a text to me, that they were searching for things that had happened months ago. Mm-hmm. So to me, it was really unclear, why are Spokane County Sheriff's officers making searches for hits months ago if data is only kept for 30 days. Yeah. So part of, I think, what Lady was trying to see too, or what I would be interested to see in his results is like, well, how far do these photos go back?
Are they actually dumping this data after 30 days, or is there
or is
bunch
this a
more
photo
stuff
from 3 months ago?
Yeah.
So, I mean, and his request is for a specific period of time. It's from December 1st to December 12th of last year.
So that would be within the 30-day
requirement. Yeah, exactly. But so, all right, so he's talking to Joan Mell on the phone, and he says, "Of course, I'm not going to try to do anything nefarious with this photos. I'm just trying to figure out what information I can get on these vehicles." Yeah, especially at a time, like you said, Luke, when like most vehicles that are even adjacent to ICE like are very difficult to track. They're unmarked. They change their license plates. This is one of the few touchstones where we can be sure that we get some actual solid information. And she says, based on his response, she says, "Oh, okay. Well, thank you for that information. I guess I don't have to I guess I don't have to file an injunction against you. An injunction would be like requesting a court to say that Jim Leedy can't search for these kinds of records anymore.
Yeah.
And there would be like valid reasons for that. One valid reason that actually the county sheriff's office has brought up is like, if you have a restraining order against somebody or you're a survivor of domestic violence, hypothetically, your abuser could potentially put in a request for photos of your car, kind of try to track your movements that way. And the county has like methods that they deploy to, like they check to see if the person who's having data requested about them has any active restraining orders. And if they do, they notify them that somebody's requesting their information, or at least that's what they told Daniel Walters at Investigate West.
Oh, that's good.
Which is good.
So you'd want to know if somebody's tracking you if you thought that they were going to try to harm you in any way, right?
Right. But what's interesting is that Leedy ran a little test with my license plate number and put in a request for.
We should back up and explain how Joan Mell probably got Jim Leedy. So when you do a public records request, and this has actually happened to me in a marketing context in a different life when I was in advertising, but if you do a public, anything that like sits in somewhere as a public record where you've interacted with a public official who is like totally in a like public records requestable like position, like an elected, like our council members or our mayor. But there's a private party who's been on an email chain or something with people where it is technically public records requestable. Sometimes but it's like a private citizen who's on the receiving end. Sometimes there will be a reach out from the public records officer to be like, hey, in this case, it was a request for marketing proposals that we did a few years ago, and somebody requested every single marketing proposal that had been done, and they called, I think, every single one of those advertising agencies to be like, hey, this person's asking for your proprietary information. Do you have? And the thing that's interesting is they don't say like, you can say yes or no, you can veto this. They say, like, do you want to initiate the process where you can say, no, my information is not actually, or should not be revealed in a public record, whatever. The thing, though, is I think that's up to the discretion of the person handling the records request, and which is why it's interesting.
Escalated to the court.
So at some point, Jim Leedy made this request, and then whoever was processing that request, or maybe somebody higher up the food chain, was like, let Joan Mell, the lawyer for Geo Group, know that this was happening, and then that's probably how they got a hold of Jim. So now, Sellers, continue your story about the test we did.
Yeah, because I was like, well, maybe this is just a courtesy that they do for everybody because we've heard them say that they do it for domestic violence survivors or people who have active restraining orders filed against people. And clearly they do it for the Geo Group. So maybe they're just doing this for everybody.
Yeah.
And so Leedy put in a request for my license plate number, and I gave him a couple of months. I don't drive all that often, and when I do drive, it is mostly in the city limits. And if you aren't familiar, I have been on my little soapbox about this, but there are no flock cameras in city limits, with the exception of cameras in Lowe's parking lots.
And you've been avoiding Lowe's parking lots for exactly that reason ever since.
Well, I have been to. That was the only flock camera I thought that I might have tripped. So I gave Jim a couple of months that I thought that I had been in the Lowe's parking lot. And so he was both going to see, like, did they have those photos from a couple of months ago when I was in the Lowe's parking lot? And would I get a, like, consideration notice for my vehicle being searched? I did not get a notice.
Has he gotten any records back? on it? Or-
Not yet, and I want to say that he told me that they're saying they don't have any records. So that could be that the time period was too far back.
Right.
It could be that I was wrong about when I was in the Lowe's parking lot.
Yeah.
But I didn't get any kind of notification that my car was being asked for. Again, it is possible that because no results were returned,
Right. It
they
was
didn't
irrelevant.
notify me. So I think we're going to maybe try a different test to see.
We're all about.
We'll keep
science
messing with it.
experiments.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. We do only have a limited amount of time to mess with this, though, which I think is what Luke was bringing up.
Well, yeah. So basically, like the way that like Jim and other folks have started, and this person that you were talking about that was the part of the court case that declared it a public record, is like citizens are now public records requesting in a way that law enforcement gets to just search for this data from the beginning. So
Because the law enforcement argument was we can have these cameras up anywhere and we can take pictures of you because you're in public and you have no public right to privacy.
Yeah.
And so in the court case, they were like, well, okay, if you're taking these photos because we're in public, then that makes them a public record that the public should
also
be able to have access to.
Yeah.
And that is how this guy was able to get records, like photos of cars, because he was like, this isn't any kind of like proprietary secret tech. You're just saying we put a camera up on public
And took
property because
pictures of
that's
everybody.
legal.
Yeah. Yeah. So now, though, the reason it's a limited amount of time is that there's a bill before the state legislature to basically lock down public records around flock cameras, including really, really restricting journalists' access to flock.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yeah, so it would restrict both the kinds of searches that Lydia's making and the kinds of searches that I made for network audits
Yeah.
that allowed us to find all of these kind of
Sketchy,
policy-breaking searches.
Right.
And so while the legislature is both considering putting some limits on how law enforcement can use the tech, they're also going to greatly reduce the way that they can be held accountable for misusing the tech.
Is it fair to say that the whatever ways they would be limiting law enforcement from using it is like a fraction of the way they would be limiting journalists from accessing it? Yeah.
Yeah, because, if I can't request that network log, how can anybody say for certain that that the Spokane County Sheriff's Office are making appropriate searches? Because we've seen for a year's worth of searches that people are submitting things with like blank reasons, no case number attached. Like that could be a very valid search, or it could be a cop searching for his ex-girlfriend.
Yeah.
And there's no way to tell. And there's no way to hold them accountable if I can't. Like, how do we hold power to account if the government is straight up saying, like, you can't request these logs, only the county can have them.
Yeah.
That's private.
And let's not forget that the number of law enforcement officers credibly accused of domestic violence is much higher than the population at large.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
Time is of the essence in investigating the system as is.
So when we're talking about this the other day in the editorial thing, I was like, we should reach out to WashCog to push back against this potential legislation that we don't like. And then I can't remember which Erin it was, but they were like, well, funny story. One of the people on WashCog's board is actually, the lawyer of record for the Geo Group. So now all of a sudden we have this is just an open question. We haven't talked to WashCog yet or not. And obviously
We're waiting. Hedge just called them. We're waiting on a statement.
I spoke with a board member. They're trying to get us a statement.
Okay.
But
so like board members don't usually have direct policy control or like direct day-to-day oversight over what an organization does.
And on top of that, like Joan Mell is a private lawyer. She has clients in many sectors, and like she's totally within her rights to be doing what she's
absolutely
doing.
But there is also this, like, if you're a coalition for open government, and now our governments, this is federal government, not state government, but our governments are increasingly mobbed up with private prison contractors and other things. It is like legal and probably not even unethical for Joan Mell to sit on this board, but it should at least give people who care about open government and maybe people who are staff or connected to WashCog a bit of pause that your board is partially composed of people who are part of the private prison industrial complex.
One of the big things that the Geo Group is fighting against right now, like it has been a constant battle since early 2025. Legislators are trying to get access to the Tacoma Detention Center to exercise their responsibility to their constituents. And like there have been very credible reports of tuberculosis outbreaks, of this detention facility being like at double capacity. We've heard secondhand from families of immigrants that like the conditions were incredibly depressing, that guards of these facilities were coming, waking them up at midnight, telling them like today's deportation day. Whether
this is
or
stuff we
not
heard
that's
directly
true.
from Cesar and Joswar, the men who were taken on June 11th. Yeah.
I spoke with Bismarck of Warnu, who was spent 45 days in that facility, and he said every Tuesday at 2:00 in the morning, like the ICE officers would come turn the lights on and like round a bunch of people up. Didn't know who was going to be for deportation. Jeez. And he never saw those people again.
Yeah, and like legislators have been pushing and pushing and pushing to gain access. It's one of those things where like they win a court case, then it goes to appeals, and then, you know, as we've seen in other parts of the country, people have won their court cases and still ICE is arresting them for trying to gain access to these facilities. So on one hand, you've literally got the government saying, hey, we want more access, we want more, like, we want to see what's going on in these facilities. And on the other hand, you have Geo Group refusing them access. And to me, that seems like it is harder to trust somebody who's saying like, yeah, I'm an advocate for open government, and also I am representing these guys. And I'm not saying she represented them in this case. I don't think that she did represent them in this case, or at least we can't afford LexisNexis, so I can't say for certain.
LexisNexis is
like
expensive
$1,000 a month
for everybody.
I think you can get it through the library we're currently sitting in. But
represented them in other cases, and this is a group that's like actively fighting against transparency so that they can detain and deport people in darkness, make money off of these detainments, and like they were forcing immigrants. This is a court case that people won. They were forcing immigrants to work in the facility that they were being detained in the Tacoma Detention Center. They were forcing them to work for $1 a day. That is essentially like slavery, if not indentured servitude.
I mean, that's the 14th Amendment, right? Like that's what people talk about. Yep. So here's the thing that so one final thing, and we should probably move on to the other stories we have to talk about. This is, it's a lot of smoke, not a ton of fire yet, but it is also, I think, symbolic of how this is like the long tail of public-private partnerships and the long tail of privatizing government functions to private companies, is that they do not have the same legal requirements to disclose what they do when you're a private business. And so whenever you take what has historically been a government function and you privatize it, and that happens in Spokane all the time, like downtown Spokane partnership, the security guards that walk around is a good example of a public-private partnership. They get public dollars, but it goes into a private nonprofit, and that private nonprofit does not have the same disclosure rules as the city of Spokane would have, and therefore, on the one hand, you can say, well, it's private enterprise is also giving its resources and its expertise and its money to doing this work. So we're really like multiplying our ability to, with public funds. Yeah, that's like the positive version of this and probably the neoliberal version of this. But the other one is that especially when it's something as important as when we're depriving people of their liberty by putting them in jail, and that's a privatized prison they're going into, we lose so much insight into what's happening inside. We can't really validate if they're being treated the way that the company says they're being treated. And that's like an existing constraint journalists have and the public has, and clearly also legislators have. And now the state legislator is considering adding this additional constraint of like, not only can we not see inside of Geo Group, we're also going to pass a bill that intentionally or unintentionally is going to limit our ability to track people going in and out of that facility as well. And that seems really problematic to me.
It does. And to be so, this is again a tangent, but just going off of something you said, I want to be so clear. Most of the people held in this detainment facility have not been convicted of a crime. ICE is increasingly, especially in Washington, detaining people with no criminal record. Many of these people came here legally and had their status revoked by the Trump administration. We're seeing ICE detain citizens. And I feel like I've seen so many people on the internet be like, well, criminals deserve this, which is, already a problematic sentiment. But most of the people who are being held in the Tacoma Detention Center are not criminals. At worst, they have done a civil offense of immigrating.
And in many of those cases, it was not a civil offense a year ago, right? Like a lot of these people were here legally, and many of the people we've covered were here under the previous, multi-decade long immigration or refugee status quo.
Or in the process of getting their green card in here, had a
and being detained at their green card interviews.
Yeah.
And even for the people who have been convicted or accused of horrific crimes, that still doesn't mean that we should allow them to be forced to work in a private prison with no oversight.
Regarding the question of if Joan Mell represented Geo Group in the case about the
legislator access.
Yeah. I don't know about that case exactly, but she did represent them in 2017 to 2021 lawsuit that Washington brought against Geo Group for paying immigrants $1 a day.
She represented them in that case?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't... It's interesting. This article from the Sentinel Colorado just kind of details some of her closing arguments, basically saying that the Minimum Wage Act isn't applicable to immigration.
That's the 14th Amendment.
Yeah.
That's the 14th Amendment too. Yeah.
That's just horrific.
That's just a quick Google that I found.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this story isn't out yet. Hedge, what are your next steps on it? We're trying to get a hold of Joan Mell. We're probably
we've spoken with Joan Mell.
Okay.
She gave me a good amount of time. And she said that she called Jim out of diligence, like she was just trying to figure out what she needed to do legally. Whether it was an injunction.
It wasn't like a threat or anything.
That's what she said. And then she also noted that, an agency reaching out to a subject of a public records request is provided for in state law.
Yeah.
They can do that. And she said that that's been an increasing practice. And generally, she's pretty skeptical of this practice. She says that the agencies, she used the word weaponize this provision in the law.
Well, that's certainly what we're concerned about in this case, Joan. Yeah.
To slow down public records requests and make them unavailable.
Yeah.
Jim got his records faster than most people get records. It was within a month that he had his records.
Got to give the Spokane County their props for being pretty quick on that.
Yeah.
Well, it was funny because it was 3 days after Joan made the call that he got his records back after about a month of waiting. But she said she was pretty careful to say, in this specific case, she felt like it was a legitimate use of that provision. Again, we're trying to track down more information, and I asked the Spokane County Sheriff spokesperson Mark Gregory if there was a policy around this, how often the sheriff does this. He hasn't gotten back to me. We'll update as we get new information, but it was an interesting conversation. A little side note that's very interesting is Joan is also chomping at the bit to represent the Pierce County Sheriff Keith Schwenk. Not in specific.
Pierce County, for people who don't know the counties, that's the county around Tacoma.
Yeah, where the ICE facility is located.
Yep.
And it's interesting because Swank has been in the news lately. He's battling a number of investigations, including one dealing with public records requests where he's accused of altering text messages so that he didn't have to disclose anything that seemed offensive. And then, and also, I was like I said at the beginning, I was at the state legislature with the Washington Coalition for Police Accountability. All the legislators could talk about was this testimony that Schwenk gave. I believe it was on Friday, it was sometime late last week, where he was testifying against a bill that would impose stricter rules for sheriffs and police chiefs in the state of Washington. They would have to be certified like all the other police officers by the Criminal Justice Training Commission. And if they lost that certification, then they couldn't be in that leadership position anymore. And Keith Swank showed up, guns ablazing.
Metaphorical guns ablazing.
Yeah, not literally.
Literal.
Yeah.
Important to note in this specific
he was audibly and visibly upset to oppose this bill, and he accused the legislature of introducing this bill just because he said that transgender women are actually men. They were coming after him specifically for that language, and that if they tried to remove him from his position, he would rally his voters to stand around the Pierce County and Tacoma City building.
That is interesting.
To defend him from being deposed.
The Washington Association of Sheriff and Police Chiefs are now considering,
they want to expel him.
They want to expel him. Yeah, I don't know exactly what the actual consequences of. He also has repeatedly said that he wants to work with ICE. Which I think he's under investigation from the Washington State Attorney General.
I looked up
right
that
now.
up earlier. I mean, it's not the first time a sheriff, let alone in our state, let alone, nationally, has had a really bad case of main character syndrome. But yeah, like making one comment against trans people is not why anybody introduces a bill that would be as expansive as this thing is. I mean, and the point of the bill, just to be clear, and I mean, his concern over it is part of, like why this would be an interesting bill. Is like police chiefs, but especially sheriffs, are elected officials. Mm-hmm. There have been some pretty bad sheriffs over the years, and the ability, and also they have a job to do, right? Like they have an actual job that the state has deemed that everybody, basically all of their underlings, have a standard of care to uphold, of professional conduct, and that what is it called, the Criminal Justice Training Commission or whatever, is the body that sort of gets to decide if an individual sheriff deputy is allowed to be a cop in the state at that time through the certification process. So this would be the argument is that it would be undermining the will of the voters to like decertify a sheriff specifically because they are an elected official. But the other thing is like, yeah, but what if the voters like voted in a psychopath who does really bad things, and then there should be, the argument on that side is there should be a way to remove them basically for cause, right? Like you are bad at your job, you are actively harming people, we're going to take away your right to be the sheriff of this county. And because they're elected, like that means you don't have to have any qualifications at all, right? That's
be a sheriff.
That's like, another important point.
There's no, like, you don't have to take.
You could be a straight up criminal. You could have sexually assaulted somebody or, domestically abused them. And it does not matter if the voters think that you are the best candidate for that.
Yep.
Right.
Which is wild.
Yeah. So that's why we probably
like
spent.
The president.
I mean, basically, yeah.
And I mean, there's a lot of,
and a similar level of impunity that the president gets.
Yeah, like the constitutional sheriff movement. That's
the highest law in the land.
Yeah, picking up steam of like, we are actually the biggest bosses because the voters approved us,
and we're in the Constitution.
Okay, wait. So what if one of us gets a big cowboy hat and runs for sheriff?
I mean, there is going to be a sheriff election here in Spokane County somewhat soon,
gosh.
right?
Somebody could go up against John Knowles.
I do love cowboy hats.
I'm not doing it.
I don't know a good segue, but I did see that Hillary Swank lives in Bellingham, Washington, and now I'm wondering if she's related to
the actress Hillary Swank.
The actress Hillary Swank.
Boys Don't Cry, yeah.
Val, you've been working on something. Do we want to run
Let's do a quick break.
Ad break and then jump into Val's.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I've got kind of a smattering of just little small baby things.
Perfect.
So.
That should get us to the end. All right, Val, what have you been working on?
Okay, so last week Erin Sellers got a hot tip from a local person who is in Spokane.
Who is
all
very
our
anonymous.
stories start with sellers.
Yeah.
I'm a gossip. What can I say? Everybody loves to text me on Signal.
That's why your hair is so big. It's full of secrets. That was a Mean Girls reference. Okay, just making sure.
We got 15 minutes.
Okay, so we
maybe
got-
keep the Mean Girls references to a minimum.
So we got a tip from a local post office worker saying that that person, worker, and all their coworkers got this weird letter from their bosses basically saying that this letter means that this person is provides an essential service for the USPS and to carry their USPS ID badge with them at all times. And
Along with the letter.
Along with the letter. So basically, like, if there's any curfews established or like a lockdown of some type, they're supposed to show this letter to authorities to get past.
So this is the sort of thing that happened during the pandemic a little bit, and now the concern is that if it's happening now, it's because of one part of the federal government is concerned that another part of the federal government is going to start instituting like martial law or something.
Yeah, and so the letter was dated January 5th. It was from like the National Post Office, but our local post office people didn't get it until January 15th. January 14th or 15th. Anyways, last week. And but basically this letter has been floating around on the internet as well. A lot of post office workers across the nation are kind of all like, what the heck is this letter for?
Yeah.
Because the only time they can remember this essential services letter being sent out was in 2020 during the pandemic.
Right.
And you know, the worker that we talked to said that they've worked at the post office for about 5 years, and they've never seen a letter like this outside the pandemic. And that older coworkers who've worked there longer also said that they hadn't seen letters like that.
And there wasn't a lot of explanation about like, hey, just so you know, and probably for a good reason if it's coming from like the post, whoever runs, the postmaster general or something, being like, hey,
Keep commentary to a minimum.
we're a little worried my boss might do something that like, my boss being Donald Trump might do something that makes it harder for us to deliver the mail. So we're putting out this letter as a stopgap against that or whatever.
Right.
There was no explanation like that. So workers are just left to wonder what this means and what it's about.
Yeah. And so like I'm looking all over the internet, in addition to like I reached out to USPS spokespeople, the local and national USPS unions, and our local postmaster, who finally actually got back to me today to give me the regional spokesperson.
Oh, funny.
So I've emailed the regional spokesperson too. And the only answer I got from the national USPS spokesperson was like one line. It said, this was just a reissuance of our essential services letter.
Okay.
And I'm like, cool. How often do you issue these? Is like, what's the
is this a normal reissuance schedule or
how often do you do it? When was the last time you issued it? Crickets. I've emailed back again and I'm like, hey, Jim.
Can I call you Jim?
And I'm like, hey, I just want to be able to, like, if this is nothing, I would love to just be able to write a story saying, hey, this is nothing.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Like, this is one less thing you have to worry about right now. But as it stands right now, we don't know anything about this.
Yeah.
And just the squirreliness of the national USPS, like back when I was looking through like all their archives of their like their public facing but employee blog stuff, and when they were given out in 2020, they were given out 4 times that I found, and this was also confirmed by PolitiFact that was fact checking this claim. But each time they like had a blog post about it, or not each time, but at least the first time they had a blog post about it
explaining why.
Yeah. And like I looked at like all the recent blog posts, and it's like January, like the letter was sent January 5th, and on January 5th they announced new limits for TSP accounts for like a retirement savings plan, on their blog. And on January 6th, it says USPS issues report to Congress. I, read that release. There was nothing about these letters. So there was nothing in their even like employee facing blogs that explained anything about these letters.
Just like no clarity.
No clarity at all. And like people, and it's really important to note. So like, there's a lot of speculation online. There's like a whole Reddit thread or like whatever they're called, that like everyone's like, what's the deal with these letters? And people are like, oh, we got them in the pandemic, it's fine. But then people are like, but why are we getting them now?
Yeah, right.
Because like
the pandemic was a pretty bad time.
Like a pretty novel, like this is all
kind
new,
of a big,
this is all different,
nationwide emergency situation.
So like
once a generation, once every 100 years, sort of a situation. Yeah.
And so like that's all I wanted. Why now? Why is this letter being issued right now? And nobody has answered that. But like there's two only like articles that I found about this as well. One was from Snopes and one was from PolitiFact. PolitiFact had the better one, that was a little bit more critical of, but it still didn't like get to the like heart of why they are reissuing it now.
Yeah.
And Jim gave them the same line, that it's just a reissuance. But the PolitiFact article pointed out like the timeline is kind of wonky if we want to go down the like, oh my gosh, we're going to martial law,
And
fears.
to be clear, I think the letter, like this was something I got wrong when I first read it, but I think the letter does say it's in the event of like local and state curfews. So it's unclear like how that would work, like, and I think, nobody really knows what would happen if the Insurrection Act was
And like
I think
in the
place.
Reddit thread, people were mentioning like, oh, maybe it's for like when there's a natural disaster and we still have to.
I mean, theoretically, it could be all of those things, but like, why are we doing it now?
Yeah.
Again? Yeah. And I do think like with things like National Guard or the state level guard members, those are state level things, and that's why it's unclear if Trump is allowed to call out the National Guard in specific localities. So, but I mean, in that situation, if there were martial law declared federally, it would be the state like guards probably implementing it. So
it would also be like mayors worried about there's citizens being like just like pounded by like federal forces in the middle of the night, like go home at night.
Well, and there have been mail carriers who have been attacked by ICE, so like it's very interesting, and I just like want to know why. And like,
to be fair, the last curfew that I can remember being implemented is the curfew that Mayor Lisa Brown implemented
and that was
the
a
night
local
of the
curfew.
June 11th
That was a local curfew
protest.
So I mean, it could just be like in response to local protests everywhere. We want people to carry these around so that if a curfew is declared, but nobody's saying that, and that's what's so frustrating. So like, there's so many conspiracy theories online, and people are like, oh my gosh, martial law is going to be declared, it's imminent, we know. And it's like, we don't know, but all the ambiguity is just feeding into this. And like, just to clarify, like the letter was dated January 5th. On January 7th was when Renee Good was killed, which sparked even more protests.
And like every 2 days or something, Trump goes on Fox and says that he might declare.
Well, and then it wasn't until January 15th was when Trump threatened the Insurrection Act like outright on Truth Social. He's like alluded to it before. He's like kind of said it offhand before, but I think the Truth Social post was the first time he was like, I want to do the Insurrection Act. So like, the timeline kind of doesn't really make sense if they're doing it in response to Trump.
We've talked about the problem with like fact-checking websites. It's like, is it? Can you draw like a direct line between our commander-in-chief like threatening the Insurrection Act and then like these letters going out? No, but there's also been a year of abject chaos preceding that might have led some forward-thinking, disaster-minded person at the post office and probably other parts of the government to be like, hey, we might want to dust off those letters again and like reissue those just to make sure all of our people still have them.
And it's like,
when When were they given to this? When did your anonymous source say they were given out to the Spokane office? Because they were issued the 5th, but that wasn't the day that the Spokane post office.
Yeah, I believe they got it last Thursday. Yeah, which I don't.
And honestly, I mean, there's like tens, if not hundreds of
the
thousands.
15th, right?
Yeah, there's the 15th. Yeah, it was like.
Was that before or after Trump's Truth Social post?
I think technically after, only because of the East Coast West Coast time difference.
Yeah, right.
But
so,
yeah.
So it's probably like,
and people like in the USPS thread are like, oh yeah, we got it last week in our small town in Tennessee, and like, so like everyone's getting it at like kind of different times, but everybody's wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, potentially relevant, but like 6 hours ago, PBS reported that the Army has ordered military police in Alaska to get ready for possible deployment to Minneapolis. So like,
fantastic.
It's, you know.
Like, it's not like the conspiracies, quote unquote, aren't like unfounded. Like, there's been crazy stuff happening for a year, and it's just like ramping up, and people are scared. And like, if anybody at USPS is listening to this, please answer my questions, because if we can just say, hey, this is just a precaution for like if local protests like get crazy and
like we want to know.
Yeah, like we just
can be reached on Signal at 509-850-0488.
Thank
and
you.
Signal is an encrypted chat service that we'll be able to protect your anonymity.
And I will note that like the source that reached out to us, they were like, I'm not sure if this is newsworthy. Like, I'm going to put it in your guys' hands.
We're trying to figure
like,
that out.
And they're like, I don't know if they're he or she, but they're like, blah, 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 blah. They are like, some people are just like blasé about it and they're just like whatever, and some people are like a little spooked about it. So like,
and I'm sorry, this is back to the Geo Group thing. It's like when you don't provide adequate information, people are going to have that entire range of emotions about things, and people are going to start hyperventilating about. They might take something that's actually is very serious, not very seriously, because that's their vibe. And if they might take something like this that might have a very good justification and start freaking out about it, which is why we need more transparent communication from all levels of government. We have like 3 minutes left. Do we have time for the potpourri, Erin, or do you want to just talk about can-opened buses?
Give you some headlines, actually. Right. So in Spokane, I'm going to try not to laugh about this because actually people got hurt. But in
the double-decker buses,
the last 4 days, there have been 3 collisions of buses, vans, or transport vehicles with bridges. The most headline, the one that made the most headline, was an STA double-decker bus hitting a bridge, and those double-decker buses are new.
Yep.
There was
very cool.
Extremely cool.
There was an article yesterday from the Spokesman Review where the reporter of the story found that the navigation system on the bus had mistakenly misrouted them to go under that bridge. STA won't really comment on that, or they say it's part of an active investigation, but there was like screenshots of the nav system telling drivers to go under
to go that way. Okay, that's interesting.
So, and like drivers are told specifically, like, do not go off route, especially when you're driving a double-decker bus. There's only like 3 bridges downtown that they can actually fit under on their way out to Cheney. So it seems like it kind of put that driver in a rock and a hard place between following policy of sticking to the route and obviously not running your bus into a bridge that you cannot fit under.
Right.
There were like 9 people who I think were injured.
All told, because there was 4 on the double decker, right?
Or was 9 there ended up by the end of the day. I think yesterday when the spokesman story came out, they had found 9 total people. And those injuries, like none of them were life threatening so far. And it seems like people are mostly going to be okay, but still really traumatic. Somebody lost a tooth. Somebody's face was pretty swollen. And those are just the folks that the reporter was able to talk to.
I mean, the photos from the scene were terrifying, specifically of the double-decker bus. Really scary.
So that was some headlines, a lot of buses hitting bridges. There also were 2 unnamed employees who were just fired from SRHD, the Spokane Regional Health District, which is just sort of the latest in a hemorrhage of employees. For
our public health department.
Recent installment before this was the administrative officer, Alicia Thompson. and
We've
separating
interviewed before. Yep.
from SRHD. We are at 3:55, so that's hundreds of students have been walking out of their schools. Last week you heard us
really cool.
on the radio talking about Spokane
Yep.
Public Schools, but that wave has continued. We have heard of students at junior high schools. We have heard of students from the
private
Valley
schools.
at private schools in more conservative areas. I think CVHS and University, I think both had students walk out this week. And we have heard that students at Cheney and Gonzaga, so Eastern
Gonzaga
Washington
Prep.
University and Gonzaga University,
Oh, okay.
it's spreading to
Colleges
students
as
now.
well. Cool.
So that's our time
There
for
was
today.
there was a photo of Sherry McMahon, the president of EWU, standing behind a bunch of anti-ICE protesters. It was kind of cool.
I
All
can
right.
support.
This is Free Range, a co-production of KYRS and Range Media. Catch you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.